Hello, all you positive heads out there. It's so good to be back with all you beautiful reflections of the one source consciousness that creates and animates all things. If you're new to this podcast, of course, we are super happy to have you here, and we just ask that you bring an open mind and heart to your listening experience and to be prepared to explore vantage points that I'm convinced will help shift or solidify your current understanding of the ultimate nature of reality in a way that is extremely empowering. Speaking of exploring powerful perspectives, I'm super excited to announce the release of my very first book, The Golden Key: Modern Alchemy to Unlock Infinite Abundance. If you're ready to alchemize the circumstances in your life so that your abundance expands to an entirely new level in 2021, head over to goldenkey.gift to download the audio or ebook as my gift to you by using the code POSITIVEHEAD. All right, all you positive heads. On this week's Soul Share episode, I'm very excited to have Adam Hergenrother here with me on the show. Adam is a fellow entrepreneur who bootstrapped his way to a billion-dollar organization, as well as an author and host of the Business Meets Spirituality podcast. Super excited to have you here, Adam. Welcome to this show, my friend.
Hey man, I'm really thanks to being here. I'm excited, and I love all the work that you're doing and all the energy that goes into making a difference in people around you.
Yeah, likewise. For me, it's when I saw what your show was all about, I was like, oh, this is a perfect show for us to mix it up with. So excited to be on yours as well. And my journey has been super entrepreneurial, and then realizing it's not all there, achieving quote unquote success. So I know that's been part of what you've experienced as well. And you're very lit up by helping people. And, like Gandhi said, if you want to find yourself, lose yourself in the service of others. And so we're going to dive into that. And before we go down the rabbit hole, I would like to start with this same opening question that I always ask. My cliche opener is this. You're in an elevator. The woman next to you looks over, says, "What's your passion?" You have 10 floors to answer. What do you say?
Helping others find consciousness.
I like it. You spent the first 8 floors really, being thoughtful about your answer.
Yeah, I think that somebody asked me the other day in an interview, they said, is there a theme song for your life? And I paused like that for a second. And I said, well, I think there's 3 theme songs, because it's, I feel like my life is gone into different themes. And the currently, when I first started off in kind of business, I felt like I was more of like that Rocky, like I'm the champ, I'm like amazing, I'm in business, like, right? Like I'm going to win at all costs, like just kind of taking down the whole world.
Apollo Creed doesn't have a chance.
Exactly. Kind of jump in there. And then it was more of like, I'm in a hurry to get things done by Alabama. If you know that song.
Oh, geez.
I'm in this hurry to kind of get this linear progression of trying to get this and trying to get that and try to build up even more and get more employees and build another business, right? Just kind of just doing this to almost keep busy, to kind of almost distract yourself. And then there's a guy, Sturgill, who wrote a book. It's called, his song, it's Losing the Ego. And the first line of it says, "I woke up today and decided to let go of my ego because it never served me any good." And I think that has been the kind of last decade of my life, which I don't consider myself, I just consider myself a spiritual seeker. And then I just get to share the knowledge that I'm going, and hopefully that points people, because as you know, there's no language which people want language and objects to be able to comprehend what consciousness is, or divine, or God, however you define that is, but no words can do that. They can only point to it. And so passion that I really have is getting people pointed in the right direction, orient themselves inward so they can actually have that direct experience themselves. Because whether somebody believes me or doesn't believe me is irrelevant. Either if you believe me, you're slated. If you don't believe me, you're still caught up in the mind. And so all that we can do as this is to try to help orient people inward and to direct them to have that direct experience in life. And as they do, then they'll start to know exactly what that experience is like. We run a course called Project You. And one of the things we did in our last one is a spirituality session. And on the third day, we get everybody into transcendental meditation. And everyone just came out of the second meditation, and we kind of just sat there for a second. And I just said, how was your meditation? Everyone's like, man, I went really deep. And I let everyone kind of talk for a second. And then I just said, well, how do you know you went deep? How do you know you went deep? And everyone's just like, well, I just did. Like, I know I went deep. And well, how do you know you actually went deep? And because you can't put that in the words in a meditation, right? Like I did, I know that I went deep. Well, what does that mean?
Yeah,
you can kind of have pointers towards it, but you can't comprehend that in a level of words, because that's it. Wording is like a subject object relationship. So there needs to be an object and a subject in order to be able to put it into a contextual word. But in terms of consciousness, it's a subject-subject relationship. So it can't know itself the way that language wants to know objects or patterns or things. Consciousness just is.
Yeah, I love that. That's a very good way of painting it with words as effectively as you can.
Well, it's fun. I mean, that's part of the human experience, is that, we get to use creative words and creative metaphors. And I mean, even the Bible is written in parables, right? I mean, the Gita itself is written is in a story form. It's almost like it's trying to get you to, I think I mentioned this earlier. There's a book called No Self, No Problem, which I really enjoyed. It's about how neuroscience is catching up to Buddhism. And they really talk a lot about how the left side of the brain is the regulation of language, right? So language is always there. The left brain wants to see things in patterns. So if I were to ask, the listeners to look outside and tell me what you see, and we pause for a few moments, you may say a tree, a car, and some sort of object. And I would say, well, why didn't you say space? Because the reality is mostly what's out there. 95% of it's space.
Right.
And the reason why is because the left side of the brain has to see things in objects, has to see things in patterns. And that's why then it gets addicted to language. But there's a shadow side to language. I mean, language is a wonderful tool. The problem is when language starts to direct and control your life, then we start thinking that we are actually creating, we actually think that we're the self because of this created mirage in the desert. And the thing is like the mirage is real for people when you're in there, right? But it's not really real. It's only, and this is what the sense of self or the ego is only sustained through through your thinking, through your thoughts, through your emotions. Because if you're in the present moment, there is no ego or sense of that self, because it can't exist unless you're thinking about it. Just like in the same form as a mirage can't really exist unless you're actually thinking about it, which is why the left side of the brain tries to be in such a complete control, is because it needs to be past and future and really kind of loops it into it. Chris talks about, Chris Neubauer, the guy who wrote the book, talks about how that neuroscience can't point to consciousness in the brain. They can't actually see it, but what they can do is they can find areas in the brain that are the cause of the self being produced. And so I thought that was a really interesting distinction for me was, the brain itself is not conscious and you can't pinpoint to it, but there are mechanisms in the brain that cause the left side of the brain, the language that cause this sense of self. And so that's why when people get attached to their ego, which an ego is, in my definition, is just a collection of your thoughts, your experiences, past and future, some event that has occurred, all bundled up, right? And then you have this sense that that's who you are. But as we know, that's not necessarily who you are. That's just a collection or a fictitious character that you've created.
Right. Yeah, it's, I like to think of ego in terms of, you hear a lot, your ego is not your amigo, or EGO, edging God out, EGO, everybody's greatest obstacle. And I think it's one of these things where it's like, okay, we're in physicality, we're having this human experience. There's this tool that is there to be used in a proper context. And when it is used improperly and everything becomes out of balance and it's sort of steering the ship when, like, I always think of the Sting song, "Let Your Soul Be Your Pilot." I don't know if you've heard that song. It's such a beautiful song, and it's like letting the heart lead, tapping into your higher self, your soul. Letting the ego is great to give you the experience of separation, as long as it's within the context of knowing, okay, and the ultimate nature of reality is the consciousness that animates my form is the consciousness that animates your form. Separation is an illusion, and let's act from that foundational premise, and now it can kind of, know its place.
Yeah, I love that. It's kind of like a wave is never separate from the ocean, but yet we identify it separately, right?
Yep.
It's like you're looking at an ocean coming in there. It's like, oh, there's a wave, but really the wave is still part. Have you anybody ever seen a wave above the ocean? Right? No, it's just it's all
Right.
attached to it, right?
Right.
It kind of crashes on and rescinds back into itself. It's kind of like the
Yep.
Buddhist, enlightenment. It's like I felt myself as if I was a raindrop falling into the ocean and said, "Find me." Right?
Yeah.
You can't. That's that merging, or you kind of think of it as like a. You ever seen those flames like on a grill, like for outdoors, like, and they have like the one source of the flame, but on top of it they have little individual holes where the flame comes through to get the
Mm-hmm.
light. I always think of it, consciousness, as that kind of metaphor,
Mm.
whereas one source of light, yet it's shining through all the different individual flames. And in this sense, there's billions of experiences that are happening every day that consciousness gets to experience for itself.
Right. Yeah, I like that metaphor, and it's the idea came to mind. I think it was Rumi who said something to the effect of you're not the drop separate from the ocean that's in the ocean. The ocean is in the drop. So then
Yeah.
you have this whole idea of like, oh, okay, and the whole is in the part as well, and so that's where it gets really interesting with tapping into our power to manifest and create, be as creators, the created and creator and created rolled into one, I believe. It's where it really gets fun to play with our consciousness from the vantage point that we currently find ourselves.
Yeah, it's when you're coming back to one of the first things you said about, kind of getting into this and having a business background, with both of us are entrepreneurs in that sense. One of the reasons why we created business spirituality and just ingrained into our organization in itself is because for, I don't know, when I was probably 16 years old is when I had my first kind of awakening experience, if you will call it that. And then since then, I've kind of oriented myself on an inward path, and it showed up in many, many different variations for a long time, right? But for me, I didn't want to I didn't want life to be passive. I didn't want to go sit in a cave and meditate for 15 hours a day, or sit around a fire, like creating haikus about like what spirituality was. I actually wanted to be passive, and I wanted to lean into life. And so I actually struggled with this for a long time of trying to figure out, like, is making money bad? We've got 600 plus people in our organizations. I'm like, is building a business bad? Is it service, but I'm making money? Is that bad? Like, so I really struggled with this whole, once I got to a point where I had this goal, Brandon, that when I hit 26 years old, I was 26, and if I had made $500,000 in income, that somehow there was going to be a gift from God that was going to come down and make me feel amazing. Right. That was just the way I thought, right? Like, it was going to somehow, like a phone call was going to show up, a letter in the mail, like a Christmas present underneath the tree.
Santa Claus is going to fly
Santa
in
Claus
something.
is going to come. Yeah. And give me some pill or something. And I'll never forget this. I was at my mom's house, and it was just her and I. And my mom's the most unassuming person ever, especially when it comes to money. And I had to say, hey, I made this money this year. And she's like, oh, that's great. Can you pass the ketchup? And in that moment, though, I realized, I'm like, I actually feel worse. Like, I'm like this whole thing that I've been after, searching for, has thwarted my ability to actually be happy. It's like the search for happiness thwarted happiness.
Yep.
And so I couldn't say it like then, but when it happened, I was like, man, and I actually kind of went, not depressed is not the right word, but I got kind of like down. I was like, well, then what am I doing here?
Yeah.
Right. And I think a lot of us who have gone, or at least in my experience, particularly people in the business world, they kind of make it to whatever level that means to them, that they've associated with that. And they kind of wake up and go, is this it? Like, is this really, this is this whole thing making money? I get it. Like, it's fun for moments, but like, is this what my life is about?
Yeah.
And so I went, and since that happened, I'm 39 now. So the last 14 years has really been on this kind of real inward journey and for the first 3 or 4 years, I had no idea what I was doing. Right. I was just like, this isn't working, but I just kind of going through the motions, really looking forward to it. And that's when I learned TM, and TM was kind of the gateway drug, I always tell people, into spirituality, because it got me to start having separation from the mind. Right. It started to just start just a little bit to go, hey, what is that voice in there? Right. Like, oh my God, everyone has that voice in there. Right. Like, it was just things that are talked about so commonly now. Back then in 2006, that was right. Like seven, it wasn't as mainstream. Right. And so I was just like, I felt like I was there. And for about 5 or 6 years, I tried to put this together, and then it just been on this kind of, I want to enjoy and lean into life. And so what I've kind of really picked up from that, is that there's nothing wrong with it kind of says it this way. There's nothing wrong with any material thing. There's nothing wrong with building a business. It's only wrong when you derive your sense of who you are from anything externally. Yes. And so therefore that's the trick. So you can almost bring that back to anything that's going on in your life. If it doesn't matter if it's, you could go out and just give all of your time in service. And if you did that to contribute to your sense of self, that's just as bad as going out and making money to contribute to yourself. So it's not one way or another. And so it doesn't matter actually what you're doing. It's what part of you is doing it. And one of the things we got clear on in our organization, and that's when we blew up in our organization in a good way, was when I realized I cared way more about how we did what we did than actually what we accomplished. And the funny thing is, as you know, Brandon, the minute I stopped acting that way, we actually we started having more abundance of everything that because we weren't searching for it. And then it was already there the whole time.
I love that. That's just a profound piece of insight from, to build an organization with 600 employees. That's not the most common thing that, people accomplish. And it's just, it's so powerful to hear, look, how you do anything is how you do everything. So what is my intention? How am I showing up? What is the energy behind it? And I can definitely relate to, sort of the hamster wheel, like go, 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 go. I've been a slow learner with that, I think, in some ways. And it's like once you start realizing, like, hold on, things aren't quite what they seem. It's like you may very likely will accomplish more if you're taking the time for the self-care and the, we seeing how all the dots connect is beyond our comprehension. I think it was Osho said, everyone should meditate 20 minutes a day unless you're really busy. You should meditate an hour. And it's like, it comes back to that kind of idea, right? And just, very, very cool. I'm curious, what are the sort of the heart of your organization? You have several companies under your umbrella. What, you mind sharing just a little glimpse into that?
Yeah. So we're mainly in real estate. So I have brokerage teams in 33 states. We have a company called BlackRock Construction, which we're in development of luxury residential homes. We also build and partner with REIT companies. We do a lot of independent healthcare facilities or campuses. So we build those out as well too. We've just created this really cool thing called the Freedom Living, which is a luxury senior commodity for 27 units. And then we have staff in there to basically, it's called Freedom Living because it's like an a la carte. You pay one fee, then you can add things on anywhere you want based on who you are and what you want that month. And so that's been a really popular thing to do right now. So then we're in the coaching space as well too for that, but it's mainly aligned with real estate.
Got it. Have you been to Black Rock City yet?
I have not. I didn't know there was one.
There is Burning Man. Have you heard of Burning Man?
Oh yes.
Burning Man is they call it Black Rock City, where it's if you want to get a real dose of people exploring consciousness on all ways, shapes, and forms, Black Rock City.
Awesome.
So let's talk about whatever feels most alive for you. I mean, obviously we could go down the and most exciting for you. We could go down the how you got to where you were business wise and how you wove spirituality into that a little bit more. If there's something else that you feel, what do you feel is the most pertinent thing to share at this point?
Thanks. Yeah. Right now, I'll tell you, if you're listening, there's a couple of tactical things that I did early on in that kind of beginning journey. And so one of them, and maybe this will help somebody, at least one person, when I would show up to my office, instead of sitting there and going, what do I need to get from my employees? What do I need to get from my clients? I started reforming that to how can I contribute to the people that are around me? And it's a small, subtle change, but I found that most entrepreneurs are going there before I get out of my car every moment. And still today, I still pause for a second. I take a deep breath and I say, how am I going to contribute today? Because as an owner or even a leader of a division, you can instantly go in there and think there's a hierarchy of power there of I need to get something from you. You need to do something instead of stopping and saying, how am I going to show up today? Right. Yeah. And in business, there's so many things going back and forth. So that's the kind of ground myself. And then there's two other kind of checkpoints, if you will. The one is every time I walk through my door, and I don't always get it right, but the majority of the time I try to walk through my door, especially for bigger events or meetings, I pause and I just remind myself that I'm sitting here on this planet spinning around in the middle of nowhere. I can handle a conversation. I can handle the phone call. I can handle any of this. And all that's designed to do is to get you out of your mind, which is where when I stop, I realize, shit, I've been in my mind for the last, 5 minutes, just thinking about something, instead of pausing for a second and just bringing it back to that level of clarity that you can have about whatever the situation is in front of you, whether it's a good one or it's a challenging one. You still should be operating from that place of there. So there's kind of these checkpoints that I have, even picking up the phone. If I see my phone ringing and it's your cell phone or your office line, and it's one of those calls that you're like, man, I don't really want to take this. And you this is a better way of saying it. In any situation that I'm in, and this is why business, I think, is the greatest conduit for personal growth, right? And that's been kind of my ethos in business, is that business is nothing but a conduit for personal growth. Really, you could say that for life is nothing but a conduit for personal growth. But I kind of look at it as I'm in the business world, and that's awesome. And so therefore, everything else is great too, but like I'm gonna use business to grow, right? That's hands down. That's what I'm gonna do. So when I think about it from that angle, the first ways that I want to kind of walk into a situation, I'm always pausing to kind of reflect on where I'm at. Am I at a state that I'm going to be able to contribute to this conversation, or am I at a state that I need to be right? Because a lot of times in leadership, we have this sense that we need to be right in almost everything we do, instead of actually having radical conversations and radical transparency. And if you can actually make room or give space to people in the room that you're in to actually share those, you get actually spurs wonderful ideas. And that's where the creativity can actually flow from. But as a leader, again, leading your family, leading your partner, leading a business, leading a division, doesn't matter. We're all leaders and stuff, right? You have to make sure, where is your energy at this point? And that's always a kind of on my mind, of making sure that is in a place where I can handle anything that's happening. And if I can't kind of get over that, then I'll just cancel the meeting, because you can't bring that level of negativity or that level of ego into the conversation if you're not ready to be completely open with it.
Yeah, I love that. It's like constantly checking in with, where am I at energetically, vibrationally, respecting that, honoring that. And it's really, when you're doing that, you are sort of surfing the waves of your existence, as opposed to, okay, I'm going to force a square peg in a round hole here. I'm going to swim upstream. And that's what really exhausts us. And so, I think that's, such an effective way to approach. Obviously, it's worked well for you. So
I have this, I also have like these little things, like right on my desk, I have this saying that I keep around me. It says, need nothing and enjoy everything. You heard that before?
I haven't heard that one.
We have a lot of swag in our company that says, need nothing, enjoy everything. And I'll kind of just break that down for a second. And when you first share it with people, they're like, so what, I just need nothing? Like, it's almost like they're like, you can clearly see that they're frustrated with even saying it. Right.
Yeah.
But when you actually break it down though, it's like, it's not that you can't enjoy anything. There's a form world, experience it, honor it, enjoy it, play with it, but that's all you're doing with it. It's not who you are, right? And so it always constantly reminds me of, when I feel, even when things are going really well, that's when I actually really need to remind myself, like, hey, don't get caught up in this. There's somebody in my business world who is incredibly intelligent, like book smart, like they're incredibly brilliant. And part of our leadership journey with them has been, they used to go in a room and use their intelligence to almost belittle people. It's almost like them, because and people knew that they were actually right and they were smart and they couldn't do it, but it was so condescending the way they did it. I pulled them aside and I said, hey, look, where'd your intelligence come from? And they're like, well, what do you mean? I go, where'd your intelligence come from? Well, I studied this, I read this book, I got this degree. I said, no. I don't mean what you've used in terms of your mind to hold information. Who gave you that ability to have that level of intelligence? And in that moment, you could see instantly, he said, that's a good point. And I said, you didn't create it. I said, go create an eyeball for me, or go create intelligence. I said, that was given as a gift to you that you could process and comprehend and then recite information in a different way that most people can't. I said, so why don't you actually use that as a gift and contribution to lift people up, instead of using that as an opportunity to pull people down?
Brilliant.
And so there's ways that you can use. That's just like people want examples of business and consciousness. I think there's a lot of ways that every day business is that conduit for personal growth in that type of example, right? Where you can use your ability of being calm. And he knew I wasn't doing it as a way of I'm right, you're wrong. I'm
Sure.
just there to guide and help people along that journey. And that kind of goes with that need nothing, enjoy everything. Because if you really are truly living from a place, have you read the Great Zen Patriarch before? Third,
Mm-mm. No, I haven't.
the opening line of that is such a powerful, one of the most powerful lines in spirituality. It says, "The great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences, but make the slightest distinction and you will set yourself up between heaven and hell."
Ooh.
And that kind of goes along with need nothing, enjoy everything. It's the preferences in our mind is what causes suffering. Because if you think about it for a second, if it's raining, somebody is suffering because it's raining, somebody else is jumping for joy because it's raining. So the rain isn't like this merry greatness that basically says, hey, I'm awesome. It's just raining. And so when you no longer are fighting reality with, there's no such thing as a problem. There's challenges. There's only a problem if you don't like the way it is.
Yeah.
Therefore, that is your mind telling you don't like the way it is. And instead of actually pausing and just saying, there's a challenge in front of me. It's there. It's life. I can accept it, enjoy it, or have some enthusiasm with it, one of the three modalities. And I'm going to choose to, at least you can always accept, no matter what you're going through or where you are, you can always accept back to that moment.
Yeah. The rain, what you said about the rain, I love it. It makes me think of one of the few Bible verses that I will quote, and it's, and I might not have it exactly right, but it's essentially, consider the lilies of the field, how they neither toil nor spin. They're not fighting anything that's happening in any way. And it's like, we can be at peace with what is, we don't want to necessarily be happy with everything that's happening. That contrast is what gives life its zest. And once you learn to even, I had a friend the other day talking about this, and he was talking to someone who's really down about something, and his response to her was like, yes, that's what you came here for. It's all happening. He's real over the top. And I just love that. It's like, if you can start making that shift in your way of viewing these challenges, you do start to see them as blessings, and then find, oh, this lump of coal actually it's a diamond in disguise. It's waiting to be transmuted into, something great.
Yeah. I think that when people are relatively okay in their life, I kind of look at it like this. You can get relatively okay by kind of rearranging people, places, and things. You can get a tremendous amount of money and you can kind of rearrange so there's there. But at the end of the day, what people are really searching for, what I believe, is absolute freedom. Which the absolute freedom is how I defined it, as being able to walk through this world and not being disturbed. And by being disturbed, what I mean is not being able, the minute something happens in life, most people get put into a defensive position energy wise, right? Like their energy gets put into a defensive position instantaneously. Somebody doesn't comment on something you like, somebody says something you don't like, they look at you wrong, they don't like your post on Facebook, whatever it is, something happens externally, and then instantaneously this energy gets shifts into a defensive position, because really what you're doing is you're blocking the energy flow, right? And so when it gets shifted in that position, you then feel the need to defend your position of self, because the self goes, well, then I'm taking that personally. And let me tell you how better I am. They may be better at business, but I'm better looking, or I'm better looking. They may be better at business. So you start playing this like notch game. Like I've got kids and they don't, right? Like this is the whole thing. All that's trying to do is trying to neutralize your energy that got shifted. Instead of, it's like and then everyone plays at that level. Well, why don't you wake up one day, or at least, you realize that doesn't work. It works for moments. It works for a few periods of time. But why don't you wake up and go, man, why aren't I just okay with everything? And if you're okay with everything, the absolute freedom, then you're just okay with everything. You don't go looking for problems. They'll show up. You don't go looking for, things to find there. Life is a perfectly designed system that's unfolding. We don't need to fight that. And so when you're okay with everything, there can't be any suffering. There may not be always crazy moments of happiness, but like you said, there can always be peace. There can always be joy. If you're lying on your deathbed, you're probably not going to be happy about it, but you can certainly have peace. If you're changing your tire in the middle of the night and it's raining, you're not going to be happy about it, but can you find peace and acceptance? Absolutely. And so I think in the business world, we're hit with so much that isn't going our way. That's why it's called business. That's why people don't do it. We get this, people, that's why I always joke, like, man, People wouldn't sign up for lawsuits. They wouldn't sign up for people walking out in a day. They wouldn't sign up for people stealing money from your organization. All things that have happened, right? Like if you build a business long enough, all these things, and it's just what a perfect way to go. Okay, there's something I need to work on here, and that's kind of how I look at business. Is that, if your arm was broken, right? Your body sends a signal that says your arm's broken, it's throbbing. And so what do? You go fix it, right? If you have a headache, you take some Advil or whatever it is, or you meditate if you want to do it that way, and kind of you get rid of it. You just, either way, you're immediately seeing it and you're fixing it. Well, when it comes to our astral body, right? When it comes to like our energy field, it doesn't speak in terms of language. So we often ignore it. And so I think one of the things that we can do is bringing more consciousness into our life is paying attention to that part of our astral body that's kind of nudging you and saying, I'm trying to get rid of this so you can actually be you, right? But yet we've stored all of these, samskaras. I don't know if you're familiar with samskaras. It's just the ancient Sanskrit term for basically things that we store. When something happens that we like, we hold on to it. Like, I had an amazing vacation or amazing dinner, and you're holding on to it. But when you're holding on to it, you're missing the next moment. You're missing the next experience of life. Or the same thing when something is not, you don't want, you push it away. Like the Buddhists call it the push or cling, right? You're pushing the event away. Either event, you're not allowing it to pass through you. So you end up storing it. And the way I kind of visualize this is, if you ever want to see an enlightened being, go see a 3-month-old. They're an enlightened being at that state. They're not concerned about future. They're not concerned about past. They're not concerned about what somebody looks like. They're in the moment fully. And in that level, it's like this river that's pristine. It's flowing perfectly. And the minute we start clinging or pushing things away, we start putting boulders in the stream of energy. And so over time, you can imagine how many things you didn't like or like, right? And then all of a sudden we put all these things in there, and all of a sudden this little amount of energy is actually flowing through there. The energy is always there, right? Because when something really good happens to you, how long does it take to feel high? Instantaneous, right? Somebody calls up and says, I'm gonna give you $1 million, and boom, you're just there, right? You get a big sale. It's not like somebody injected you with a shot of epinephrine, right? You just instantly felt high. It's because you opened your stream up to allow the energy that's always there to flow through it. And think of it so anyways, when you're working on your path and you store all these boulders, at some point along your spiritual journey, you realize that when you go to remove the boulders, that your left hand's been down there holding them down. Right. And it's like at some point you just need to realize you need to let go of the rope in order to be free. And I mean, let go of the pull that pulls you out of the seat of self. And that pull is so strong. I always like to give the example. It's like, you've said no to chips or brownies at night. And then all of a sudden in the morning you wake up, you're like, nope, it's not there. But like 8 o'clock rolls around. All of a sudden this pull starts to become stronger. It starts pulling you over to it. That's the pull. You have to, in that moment, you have to be willing to let go of the rope, because if you touch the rope, you're gone for a period of time. Right. And that's when you become unconscious, right? That's just, when people refer to of consciousness or waking up, all you're doing is you're waking up to no longer living a dream like or living through a created character that's in your mind that's not really real, though it feels real. And so we can continue to work on ourselves by, every time something shows up in our lives that we don't like, we can let go. And just like you said, you can let go through acceptance. And by the way, by accepting something that's not going well in your life is like 8 hours of meditation. Because instantaneously get rid of it. You literally get rid of it. And I don't know how deep this, people have gotten in spirituality on this, but like a lot of times when I was really doing the real work of spirituality, because I think people have a vision of what an enlightened being looks like, but what they really want, I think anyways, in my experience, most people want their form of enlightenment, their vision of enlightenment inside their controlled box. It's like they want it in the controlled box, but really enlightenment is letting go and surrendering to everything in the world, which means you have to let go of all control. And part of that is such a hard process. Even, everyone does it a little differently. When you kind of get rid of those samskaras, for me, sometimes when I feel them building up, it's like I literally will gag for 5 or 7 minutes just getting rid of these things. I had a TM teacher tell me one time he threw up for 4 or 5 years every time he was trying to get rid of these things. I was coaching an individual who's a big CEO, and he had actually had the same thing. When he started going and releasing, he would sit there and gag for minutes. It's like you feel the energy shift and build up, and can you sit there and allow that to come up? It's like you're getting rid of, it's like you're going to your fridge and getting rid of the old food. That's kind of the way, the same thing. Those samskaras or those rocks and the analogies that I was giving are built up in there. And that's what actually prevents people from actually experiencing the joy and the enthusiasm that's already inside you, because you're the one blocking it.
Yeah. Wow. Love that. Before we continue on with today's episode, I'd like to take a moment to tell you a little bit about my very first book, The Golden Key: Modern Alchemy to Unlock Infinite Abundance. The concept for the book initially came to me in a dream and has been followed by a next level amount of synchronicity, confirming for me that the information in the book is pertinent to get to the world at this moment in our collective evolution. In the book, I share the 8 keys to manifesting abundance that I've personally discovered over 25 years of trial, error, and deep exploration, including one golden key that ultimately ties them all together. I think most of you will agree with me that talk is a bit cheap, especially these days, and results speak the loudest of all. Well, these keys have led me to manifesting incredible results, such as an Inc. fastest growing private company, uncanny health, incredible relationships, and success with this podcast. However, I'm not any more special than you, and anyone can apply this information to achieve incredible results in their own life. I also believe waking up our planet by sharing these keys to abundance is the quickest way to help us to transition our home into the planet of paradise it is destined to become, which is why I'd like to gift the book to you at goldenkey.gift when you use the golden key code POSITIVEHEAD. I would also like to invite you to create your own unique golden key code so you in turn can gift the book to others, as well as invite you to participate in a unique abundance manifestation game with me and the other readers that is outlined in detail at the end of the book and on the website, where readers are also going to share the inspiring results of their abundance manifestation experiments. Lastly, I'm going to practice what I preach by sharing 50% of the abundance generated from the golden game and sale of the other golden goodies on the website with you and all the other readers. So if you're ready to alchemize the circumstances in your life so that your abundance expands to an entirely new level, head over to goldenkey.gift to download the audio or ebook as my gift to you by using the code POSITIVEHEAD. Also, if you end up loving and appreciating your gifted copy of the book, please take a moment to go to Amazon and give it a review, which will greatly help me reach and unlock more hearts with the golden key. A couple things that you said made me think of this idea of our spiritual journey isn't so much of adding on all the things that we think it should be, as much as it is the stripping away of all these things that are sort of preventing our natural state, our 3-month-old self. You know, it's like, okay, you're 3 months. Let's start like adding stuff on. And, that's what we're really, it's a journey back to the beginning. I think even from, we can look at it in that case, for our physical self, but even spirituality in general, the departure from source and experiencing duality, and then back to unification, and it's like it's a circle. Have you ever heard the Krishnamurti quote? Do you know what my secret is? You see, I don't mind what you see. I don't mind what happens. Yeah.
I love that.
So good.
But that is because I think he was asking an audience in that, right? And he was like,
yeah.
What my secret is. And he said, I don't mind what happens. And it's the same thing of the third Zen patriarch. The first line, it says, the great way is not difficult for those who have no preferences. It's the same thing. It's like need nothing, enjoy everything. They're all saying the same things, whatever resonates with the person, right?
Yep.
And it's that pointer. Because it's like the only reason why you're suffering is because you have a preference for how the world needs to be. Well, the world there's billions of people in the world. I promise you, it's not going to unfold the way everyone wants it to. So it's just, the poor world, dude, is just trying to unfold. And you're so mad at it. It's like, it's just doing its thing. It's like, just let it unfold and enjoy think about this. Like, I'm like, can you imagine not having a heart? right? Like imagine the heart gives texture to everything. I mean, everything, right? Where if somebody dies around you, you feel this sorrow that's such a low beat that you're like, my heart can go so low and experience this, and you crying and just, you're in the moment. It just experiences such low that the texture. Then on the other side, it's like you have this incredible event that has happened and it's there and you're just feeling this uplifting of energy, but the variations of what your heart can play for you to experience is life itself. And yet so many of us turn off or tune off our heart because we can't handle the experience that's unfolding. And that's when we go, I don't like this. And it's like we have hands in there and we just block it. And that's why, I think there's a wonderful kind of direction and consciousness increasing, but I also in the world, I also think there's a little bit of this problem that we may need to watch where it's almost like people need to be perfect. And like, there's like this kind of push to people needing to be a certain way or acting a certain way. Well, the reality is I don't mean like acting a certain way of not like hurting somebody or not. I just mean like how they should act in life. Well, I think, I know you've interviewed so many people on your podcast. People that are on a spiritual path or a consciousness path or a personal journey path, whatever works for you, they're ordinary people. Like they're not in like dressed in a robe somewhere, not in renouncing life. It's everyday ordinary people leaning into life who are the people who are bringing it. And we have this kind of concept that we've derived, most people have, of what enlightenment or a spiritual person looks like. Like I heard Eckhart Tolle say the other day, he goes, I drink Starbucks every single morning. He goes, every day I walk into Starbucks, somebody looks at me and recognizes me and says, why are you drinking Starbucks?
Yeah, right.
You shouldn't be drinking Starbucks. And he goes, I like drinking Starbucks, right? He talks much slower than people. Like, it's what he does. And it's the same thing. He goes, I enjoy glasses of wine, right? He goes, and people are like, oh, like that. And he's like, what? Like that's my point is we've created a spiritual concept and spirituality that needs to be let go too, because that in itself is just its own form of ego trying to take shape of create. I mean, Ram Dass talked about that, right? I mean, he literally said something along the lines of spiritual seekers, right? If got caught up in a spiritual seeker is an illusion in itself, because there is no spiritual seekers. You're already spiritual. And so it's just an illusion with that. And I think part of our world needs to recognize that, Jesus Christ walked into churches and kicked over tables. The Buddha left his family and his kids at 20 to go search for that. I mean, and we revere him. Imagine an enlightened being or somebody that's searching for that, leave their entire family today. Would people follow them? Like, so we look back at these masters, yet a lot of them work or smoke cigarettes or drink alcohol every day, right? There's a human flaw to being human. You are being, there's human. It's kind of like this, the cross is in some Vedic descriptions talk about the vertical axis being rooted in being. Like that's the being connection, and the horizontal axis being rooted in human form. And the intersect of that is where the cross is. It's where they intersect. And that's the play between form and being. But it's first being and then play and form. But if you play and form, you're not going to be perfect. You're gonna make a ton of mistakes.
Perfectly imperfect. Exactly.
And so I think people need to stop having an idea of what spirituality looks like and actually just be right.
I love that. I love that. It's one of the reasons I was excited to have you on is like, okay, here's someone who's just not, I know just by virtue of walking in the business world, and especially to, at the level that you have, it's like, it's great. I love it when I come across those individuals because they're so well-rounded typically, right? It's like you have walked fully in the humanness, what is often sort of looked at as one. It's like walking in Starbucks. Oh my gosh, you've made a lot of money, and to some people, and it's like it's all spiritual. It's all just spiritual business that's unfolding here, and it's once you fully get that, it's. It makes me so happy to hear that Eckhart Tolle gets Starbucks, because in the same way, it's like, don't put me in your box. Every time it's like, I should be doing this. That's the surefire way to get me to go the opposite direction. And it's just like, he also said to speak to what you were saying earlier, I love Eckhart Tolle said, whenever something's bubbling up that's challenging, whatever's coming into your field, the question to ask, can I be the space for this?
Yes.
And that is, anytime I've caught myself over, the years since reading it years and years and years ago, it's one that really stuck with me when I'm really in it and really challenging and really feeling like I'm at my wit's end. I hear that, can I be the space for this? And instantly I am like expanded. And the answer is yes, I can. Because thinking back to, on my grandmother's, she had a little plaque on her wall when I was a kid. I remember, and it's like, God didn't promise you an easy life, just, nothing more than you can handle or something, exactly what you need to handle it, something to that effect. And it's the same kind of thing. If it's in your field and it's coming up for you, you can be the space for this. And that is actually, the kid, the 14-year-old, waking up because his legs are aching. It's growing pains. Like, you may be getting growing pains at some point, but it's taking you to a good place.
I had a woman that I was coaching, Kim, and she was having a real tough time with some emotions that were bubbling up. And she was a mother, and relatively new mother. And so I said, hey, what do you do when your baby's crying? And she goes, well, I immediately go over. And I said, well, what do you do? And she goes, I pick it up. I said, well, what do you do after you pick up the baby? She goes, I just sit with it. And in that moment, she got it. It was like, the baby's crying. I don't fight the crying. I don't yell at the baby. I just go and pick up the baby and I sit with it and rock the baby, sit with the baby and rock the baby until it's no longer crying. You're not fighting it. You just sit with it. And it kind of always reminds me of that what you just said is you're providing the space. You're just sitting with it. And so when I talked about the gagging, it's like when that starts to really bubble up, it feels like you're going to throw up. Like it really starts bubbling up. You just find the spiritual stability to get back behind it and make room or make space for that, whatever stored karmic event that's from this lifetime or other lifetimes that is there, trying to get rid of it. That's the whole point of being here, is you're trying to cleanse yourself from karmic activities to be able to self-realize, right? And so it's like the only way to do that is actually to experience. Look, if an event was stored and it hurt, it's going to hurt coming up. But the thing is, when people start feeling that bubbling sensation or that defensive energy position, or it starts to hurt, they don't have the spiritual stability to let that actually go. So they just say, I don't want to deal with this. And they go to the mind and say, mind, fix this. And your mind goes, you're right, Brandon. You're right. You can't handle this. You need to go get another car, right? Or you need to go do this. And you go, yes, you're right. And it distracts you from actually dealing with the root of the problem. And so that's why people get so addicted to the mind, because the mind is actually doing what you're asking it to do, which is like, make this energy that feels all weird go away, because you can't handle it. But the astral body is actually going, dude, I'm trying to get rid of this for you. You're not letting me, because every time it starts to show up, you can't make the space for it. You can't sit with it. You can't accept it. Therefore, you go to the mind to kind of figure out an alternative that you can get distracted and lost on, so you don't have to deal with the issues that are at hand. But the thing is, it's a tax. At some point, you're going to pay it, whether that's this lifetime or the next. So you might as well start sitting with it. And look, in the beginning, you haven't practiced this. So don't go try to take on these real big things. If you get lost and you need to be mature, you need to go for a run, or you need to journal, do those things to kind of get the energy. Just don't act from it. But think about the small things that have a, non-negative, right? Like the weather is a great example. Stop being upset about the weather. The car in front of you that drives you. You can start small in these tactical activities to start building that spiritual stability. And the more you do, you start getting rid of the smaller ones, these smaller stress patterns or some scars we talked about earlier, and the larger ones will start showing up. I once had this explained to me, that if you picture your ego, yourself as like a football field, and you wake up in one end zone and you're trying to get to the next end zone, and elephants are everywhere from the 100-yard line, right? That's how big a football field is. And they're touching each other. And so the minute you wake up in the morning, you have like 3 feet to go before you get into the elephants. And if you touch one elephant, they all erupt. And so when you're walking through your life, of course, you're going to hit the elephant and they're all going to erupt. That's what kind of presents us. So the goal is, when these things, with the meditation and practicing these releases starts to remove the elephants from the field so you can walk down the field further without erupting. And that's what I mean by spiritual stability, whereas you can actually keep moving down the field further and further so that you actually can stay seated without it actually affecting you. And that's how you grow consciously.
Yeah, I love that. And, you know, as you get more proficient at navigating the turbulence, I've noticed for me, it's become a practice of, okay, going along with the, can I be the space for this? Okay, there's turbulence. The only thing that really matters here is how I allow it to pass without affecting me in a way that causes all this other, adds to the turbulence, right? There's an event, you know, as you know, entrepreneur, you're constantly putting out fires or whatever, and it's like, okay, am I now going to let it catch me on fire? And now I'm going to be burning inside my mind and just, you know, out of control. And now, of course, you're making decisions from a place that is certainly not ideal. So yeah, it's, you know, I always say smooth seas never made for a skilled sailor, and we came here to be skilled sailors. So it's, yeah, it's a journey, such a journey. And this has been an awesome journey so far. Adam, yeah. You're great, man.
Yeah, well, thanks. It's fun. You know, we have this little saying that I've gotten. A lot of people in our world are folks that work at AHC. It's kind of describing, I see, and just saying the same thing, just a little differently. You know, most people are seeing most of their day and their life as a means to an ends. Right. And we've heard that before. It's like, I just need to get through this day. I need to get through this podcast. I need to get through this contract. I need to get through this next thing. I need to get through this week. And like, you're constantly playing this game, even if you don't consciously recognize it. If you actually bring awareness to how often you're doing this, like, I just need to go to the bathroom. I just need to go grab that drink. Almost every moment of our lives, we're doing this to an end. Right. And we've all heard that phrase before, but when I stopped and actually went, man, my entire life is like this I'm playing this means to an end game. Like it's not going to end. Right. And so what I started realizing is, why can't I just be the means? Why can't I just be the means? And so we have these shirts that are all coming out everywhere. It's like, just be the means. And that's kind of what that expression is for us. Is it doesn't, and you're going to get lost, but man, you walk into the bathroom, walk and be the means. You're getting a drink, be the means. You're going through something that's challenging, be the means, enjoy it. And it's all saying the same thing, just in a little different way. But man, when I recognize,
I like that a lot.
The whole time my life, I'm sitting there going, man, I found myself going, I just need to get through this day. It's an action packed. I'm going, what am I doing? I get through the day and I'm here again, trying to get through another day. I'm trying to get through. I have 3 kids.
Hamster wheel.
Yes. I'm like, I'm done. Right. I'm done. And when and it's like, and so for me, that's been very, very helpful in my life. We're just really resonating with me right now, just really concentrating of just saying that over and over again. I'm just going to be the means. It's going to be the means. It's the only time that I can actually experience life.
I love that. Yes. I am. That one's going to stick with me. That's a good one.
Awesome.
Thank you for that share. Well, as we start to wind down a little bit here, I'd like to shift gears just a little bit. Listeners know I love hearing stories of synchronicity or serendipity or a positive paranormal story. Some sort of inspirational story with a little magic sprinkled in if you got it, but we'll take what you got.
Yeah. You know, I always like to force serendipity to a certain extent. That kind of happens like this, and I kind of look at my life that way. When something shows up once, it shows up again and shows up a third time. It's kind of like, okay, I need to go after this. Right. And kind of force that for me. And so when I was up to when I was 16 years old, I was 100 pounds overweight. I was in the drugs. I was failing classes. Really, I was like that role model student that you really wanted your kid to hang out with. Right.
Right.
Sounds like it. Yeah. And there was a series of events that kind of unfolded for me in a period of time in about 24 hours where somebody put me on a quote, and I can't remember the quote. It just got me thinking a little bit differently. And then later on that day, I had this overwhelming sensation with a friend of mine who was just they were a friend, but it was just, the conversation was completely, it was all about them. And I just realized, like, I'm like, what am I doing? And then I got in later on, I was around this group of people and I was overweight. And so I was embarrassed to take my shirt off. And so I didn't get in there. I ended up going home that night. And it was just those 3 things that kind of happened in there. And I said, you know, what am I doing in my life? Like, what, I'm trying to be somebody else that I'm not. I'm trying to make everybody else pleasing them because I'm so insecure with myself. I'm using food as a way to kind of just cope with the damage that I'm causing. And I just started crying, right? I literally just sat down and I cried and I cried and I stayed up all night and I just said, I don't know what my life is going to look like, but I can tell you that I'm no longer going to live this life like this for me. And so that night I stayed up all night. I was half in and crying, half not. And my dad actually worked a night shift, and he came in at like midnight, and he's like, "What are you doing up?" And he saw me, and I was just in kind of like distress. And he's like, "Well, what's the problem?" And I said, I just made some, like, people making fun of me or whatever it was. And he's like, "Well, you have two options. The father he is. He's like, you can do something about it, or you can accept it." And that was the fourth kind of comment that day. And I said, you know what? He's right. I'm just going to do something about this. So I lost 100 pounds that year. I ended up stopped hanging out with friends that I was hanging out with, which they ended up stealing everything I had 2 weeks later. That's a whole other podcast. And I just kind of drifting there as this freshman in my life and not really knowing what direction I was going to take. But that was my first kind of experience of surrender. I couldn't say it like that then, but those 3 or 4 things happened that day that then caused me, I don't know what caused me to think that way. People ask me all the time, like, because a lot of times I put pictures up there and what would you think? I'm like, it was life. It wasn't me. Life was saying, it was forcing that serendipity. It was life going, okay, this is not your path, dude. Like, and you haven't been listening. So we're going to cause some suffering for you to actually kind of go through this. And then that was kind of my first real awakening, if you will, but my real kind of, I just call it a reorientation in my life. And that gave me the confidence to surrender to life throughout until where I am today.
Yeah, I love that. It makes me think of my partner. She was similar, as a 17 to 19, like the bad seed, like super substance abuse and just, every parent's nightmare, arrested and the whole thing. And she, talks about it now, and she's like, what was, it was just literally one day. All of a sudden it was like, what am I doing? Like that switch goes. And I think that your story and that story really can offer maybe some hope for someone who has that 16-year-old child right now. And, it's like, wow, I'm such a good person. I know they're such a good person at their core. Why are they behaving in this particular way? There's no rhyme or reason. And the reason may be for the contrast of all the goodness that's ahead for them, and them having that aha moment, because it's the season, it's that particular season of this unfolding existence rolls into their life. And the best thing I think we can do when it's someone that we love and care about is just hold that vision of them, coming to that place. I think that, that's a whole nother conversation, but I personally believe it's like, there's all potential moment forward, and which ones we actually navigate to, and how others show up has more to do with our vision of them than we maybe have imagined.
Yeah. And, if anybody's listening, every time I share that, I always get, somebody says, thank you for giving me inspiration for my children. And I was loved. There was really nothing wrong with my childhood, right? Like, I had great parents.
Same with her.
Yeah. So we got our challenges, but look, so you can't, it was all in me, but when you look back on it, like, you can connect the dots later, right? It's easier. It was actually the greatest gift that I ever had. So the suffering that I was going through, and every time my mom's listening to the podcast, she goes, I'm so sorry. I didn't know you were going through that pain. I'm like, look, I needed to. I'm like, I actually think the only reason where I am today is because of that suffering that I was able to go through, almost get to the bottom and realize, okay, and willing to surrender to life, and then kind of move on from there.
Yeah. So cool. So inspirational. What is the best way for folks listening to follow you? Obviously, Business Meets Spirituality podcast. Any other, things you'd like to throw out there for them?
Yeah. AdamHergenrother.com. It's got a link to all of our organizations. We're always hiring. So we've got a bunch of positions open. So if anybody hears this and they like our consciousness, our world that we have created, certainly we're remote. We have people in Vermont, but we've got in 33 states. So we're all over the place. So it doesn't matter where you are. Check it out. But go to the podcast, go there. We have a couple of books that we've written more on the business side, but check it out.
Cool.
And also interact with us. Look, like I'm not off limits by any means. People think that's funny. Like I respond to people. They're like, I can't believe I got an email from. I'm like, well, what did you think I was going to do? Like, I'm not any better than anybody. And hopefully if anybody got anything from this podcast, they can realize that if I can do this, anybody can, right? I'm no different than any one of you. Maybe some time on task, but that's about it. And so certainly send me an email. I'd love to interact with you.
Awesome. Love the humility. It's the key word, I believe, to tie all this together. And it's, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. And like you said, it's all an extension of self in some way, shape, or form. So this idea of better or stack ranking, which is so prevalent in our society, is like, it's exhausting. So thank you for holding that vision and being a beacon for just some very, very rational, real truth.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on.
So, I have one final cliche question for you.
Let's do it.
It is this. In 60 seconds or less, what is the meaning of life, according to Adam Hergenrother?
To self-realize.
Yeah. And so it is. Thank you, my friend. This has been such a pleasure. And all of you out there listening, thanks for tuning your beautiful brainwaves in. Until next time, journey well. Also, quickly, before we sign off, I wanted to remind you to download the Golden Key, audio or ebook, as my free gift to you at goldenkey.gift using the code POSITIVEHEAD. I also wanted to remind you that I will now be doing a live Q&A every Thursday night at 6 p.m. Pacific time on the new social audio app Clubhouse. I have really been wanting to connect and interact with all of you more for quite some time, and I'm super excited to now have 2 new ways to do it. First, if you're already on Clubhouse, be sure to follow me and click the little bell on my profile and select to always be notified when I go live on the Clubhouse app. And if you'd like to connect on an even more intimate Zoom gathering once a month, now you can do that too by registering at goldenkey.gift.